Hello, everybody. We're going to answer your questions again tonight, but first, just a brief summary of what happened a week ago on election night. I think we shouldn't be too disappointed in our result. It was down, but this election was really a referendum on Trump. And we were kind of beside the point for most progressives who saw Biden as their way to get Trump out. And so it's different in 2016. That was an open seat. Clinton and Trump were very unpopular candidates. So a lot of people said, I'm going to support the Greens. They like our platform. So I think that explains more than anything else. The larger dynamic explains where we ended up. Sure, the corporate media blanked us out. The Democrats attacked our ballot lines, and they smeared us as spoilers. But that always happens. I think it was more extreme this time because of that larger dynamic. It was anybody but Trump for the center and the left. So it's that larger dynamic. And we kind of knew it'd be a tough year, and it was. We did have successes. We ran over 200 local candidates. At least 10 of them won. Some notable results were Emmanuel Estrada, 26-year-old young accountant, got elected mayor of Baldwin Park in East Los Angeles, a city that's very corrupt. I think that's why, that helped him, because people want somebody to clean it up. And we're going to have to support him because he's got a real job on his hands. Franca Muller-Paz got 35% in Baltimore. She had the support of the AFL-CIO, which had never supported a non-Democrat. It's a city that the city council, it's been a one-party Democratic Party dictatorship for nearly 80 years. And DSA supported her teachers union, and she got 35%, which was the most competitive race in Baltimore and a good foundation for the future. Lisa Savage up in Maine, was widely praised, acknowledged for presenting a positive program, our program, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, ending the endless wars. She was positive while the Democrat and Republican were very negative, and people appreciated that. She ended up with 4 or 5%. Democrats had this smear campaign or scare campaign, really saying, well, if Gideon, the Democrat, wins in the second round after coming in second in the first round in ranked choice voting up there, the Republicans will take it to the Supreme Court and get the election overturned and ranked choice voting eliminated. And they said that's why you shouldn't even rank Lisa Savage. So ranked choice voting didn't really work because a lot of people took that advice up in Maine. Still, Lisa ran a good campaign and got 4 or 5%. And there were other races, but I think that indicates, what our task is now. Greens have won over 1,200 races over the years. We have actually a pretty high percentage of wins. It's like 30%. We have over 100 Greens in local office. And what we got to do now is go back to the grassroots, strengthen our local chapters, and we should be electing thousands to local office. There are over 500,000 elected offices in this country. Many of them are local in gerrymandered districts that are one-party districts. And when you go knock on doors in these local races where money isn't such a big deal, people will vote for you just because you came by and listened. The major party candidates don't even campaign. Once they get the designation, it's a free ride to the election. I see that here in Syracuse. We had a firefighter who the Democrats put in the city council, and he pushed some things the mayor didn't want, and they pushed him out. So he came to us and said, I want to run with you to get my line back, but you got to teach me how to run, because he had never run a campaign before. So I think there's thousands of opportunities for us, and the Greens and the independent left that's where we got to build a political foundation, an institutional foundation. Once we get people in local offices, then we want to run for state legislature or Congress. People say, hey, the Greens can win. We already done elected them. So I think that's the path forward. And the other thing I'll say is Biden is going to disappoint progressives very quickly. He was already saying today that he's going to check out all his cabinet appointments with McConnell in the Senate So McConnell's virtually going to be part of this administration, and that's in line with Biden's history of working across the aisle, going back to Strom Thurmond in the 70s, through George Bush in the war in Iraq. So progressive people are going to be very dissatisfied with that. So I'm saying get ready, because our time is coming, and it's coming soon, and we gotta get serious about local organizing. So yeah, that was a 5-minute little talk. I'm gonna stop there and let Angela, my campaign manager, who's chilling
about her,
to call me back. Angela, what's going on?
Well, hey everybody. Yeah, it's been a heck of a week, and my dog is doing all sorts of stuff over here. I've seen people in the chat referencing the op-ed that we ran, that Essence was kind enough to run with us. And we've also been sharing information on Twitter and our other social media platforms about, where do we go from here? Because I know that, there's been a lot of different feelings that people have been having around this election. There was a lot of, and there still is a lot of anxiety and, folks just wondering, what do we do now? And it's, things that we've been alluding to all along is making sure that we have a presence in our communities, who, people have been, the after effects of COVID have not gone anywhere. And it's not just, reading about the Dakotas where the rates of COVID infections are just like spiraling as they are in, other places in the country. So we're still dealing with this pandemic, and we're also dealing with all of the stuff that came out of it. We still have a problem with people being unemployed. We still have a problem with people being housing insecure, and concerned about how they're going to eat and put food on their tables. So our communities need us. And it's something that Howie and I have said the entire campaign. We stand on this. Our people need us. And so getting involved, at the local level, finding out, who's doing what in your community to be helpful, and how do we plug into that? And also, getting involved in political education, popular education, because quite frankly, the thing that I'm thinking about, like as far as electoral politics, we are up against two parties that are very well funded, that are very deeply entrenched, and they are going to continue to do everything that they can to squeeze the left out of the conversation if they are allowed to do it. And so the time for the left to get organized in this country is right now. And so that's the thing that is most foremost, like most present in my mind right now.
Okay, we're open for questions, and here we go.
Hey,
Z Manny, hi. What about the parties that joined your Left Unity campaign? Will you now bring them together and launch a Left Unity coalition? I think our first step is to have a discussion with each of those groups, a joint discussion. I mean, Angela and I suggested in our message to supporters, which went out today or yesterday, that none of us is big enough to build a major party on the left alone, and we need to be working together on that. Of course, what will be the basis for that party will be the people that are alienated from both parties and vote in low numbers: working class people, people of color, and youth. And man, the one thing we've been getting all week is young people, including teenagers that didn't get to vote, pleading with us to keep going because, they see clearly that there are no real solutions coming from the Biden administration any more than Trump. And they're fighting for their futures, about the climate and racial justice and economic justice. And, they're at the age where they haven't made compromises, because once you start making compromises, it doesn't stop. And they're going to be the backbone and the spearhead and the energy for a movement going forward. And I know Angela and I, they say we inspired them. Well, they're inspiring us. We really appreciate that feedback. Apparently, and I'm not a TikTok guy, and somebody wrote, we got to get on TikTok. we're on TikTok. I don't know if my campaign did it, but I think those kids put out, their own summaries. I know they're short summaries of what we were talking about. And some of those TikTok messages, I guess you'd call them, got over 2 million views. So there's a base out there, and they're the future. So that's another reason to be optimistic. So I know Angela's big on left unity. What do you want to add?
Yeah, and it's a question that I also answered on, we were talking, or the question was posed on Twitter. We are absolutely here for coalition building. And, we, like Howie said a minute ago, one party itself is not enough to take on this machine, essentially, that we're up against. And so we are going to have that unity. That wasn't just some, slogan we had during the campaign. We meant that. And we embodied it. For folks who are, remembering, we are also the nominees for the Socialist Party of the USA. I'm also a member. So yeah, that the left unity thing is big, and the coalition building is big. And I am looking forward to, doing skill shares and, knowledge, exchanges and mutual aid and whatever folks are into. There's quite a few folks that I'm going to be reaching out to. So, and as far as TikTok goes, look, I'm old. I don't even know how to use TikTok. And so I'm looking at all of these, and maybe I need, my daughter would probably be able to school me on it really quickly, but I have no idea how you use TikTok, much less how to make one. So, but I'm looking at all of your comments about, TikTok is the thing. So I'll have to check that out, but just understand I'm old. I just got into Twitter not that long ago. So yeah. Dave K. Hey, Sugar. Is there a way for me to be directly active in helping your future campaigns? I want to assist directly with marketing. I switched my party registration to green because I want to push for you. That's dope.
Well, I think the first thing is go to our website, howiehawkins.us, sign up. There's a volunteer form. Indicate your skill in marketing, and somebody should get back to you. And if they don't, be a squeaky wheel, because we need all the skilled people we can get. I don't know what state you're in, but as we said, we're not in a presidential campaign now. We're in an organizing mode, and what we want to do is help local Green parties really learn how to organize, how to build a base, how to do deep canvassing, go out and talk to people that we identify ought to be with us, like our program, but are not engaged because they're alienated from politics or don't have a way to plug in. I mean, by setting up local Green chapters where people can participate. Democrats and Republicans don't do that. There's a vacuum there we can fill. And it should be a place, our meetings need to improve. Greens tend to do a lot of, administrative stuff. And, what we got to do is leave that to an exec committee and, have educational meetings and then talk about the issues in the community and how we can make a difference, and then go out and do something about it. People get involved because they want to learn stuff and they want to do stuff. And so that's just one example. We're going to try to put together some materials, help people organize locals, and then also, how to win local campaigns. It's not rocket science. It's hard work, but it can be done. And so, we may plug you in. Now, while it's hard work, that means you go out, you identify your supporters, you talk to people, and then get them to vote. You build a list. And that's the most important thing, particularly in local elections. But marketing is public communications. We think the Greens can improve a lot in our relationship to the media and our own media, our own literature. So, as a marketer, I'm sure you have ideas about that, but, it's about communications. And that's an area where we can improve, whether you end up plugged into your local party, your state party, or what we're doing in our organization here at the campaign level.
I'm going to have to learn TikTok. Oh, this is such a good question. Valhalla Akira. Hey, darling. What would you recommend to the younger generations to do to help their communities? I saw that showed up a couple of times in the chat. That's a good question. One of the things that we've been doing, because I've been getting a lot of young people in my inbox, my email box, asking the same question, and what I've been doing is steering young folks toward the young eco-socialists. I can't talk tonight. Our group, Yes. And, just getting young people plugged in with Yes, and you can kind of, see what they're about and find your, where do you fit in, how can you get involved locally where you are. That's pretty much what I've been doing. But like for young people who are not necessarily like interested in joining a party specifically, I think it's helpful. I think one of the most important things you can do is find out who's moving things that you believe in where you are. Who's organizing, like if it's around, the movement for Black lives, Indigenous people's rights, rising up for, people who are along the LGBTQIA rainbow. If you're fighting for housing, whatever it is that moves you, where you are, who's doing that work, and how can you meet them and, be helpful in a way that's safe. I mean, how, these things, especially actions now with COVID and ramped up police aggression, there's a lot to consider. And, when I was doing actions, making sure our young people was safe or were safe was the biggest thing, is making sure that if young people were present, we were very mindful about their safety. But like, yeah, if you're not necessarily interested in plugging into a party, you want to help feed people who are houseless or things like that, you can find out who's doing that work locally and, vet them. Does it feel right? Do are they doing their work safely? Things like that, and get involved that way. I think that's pretty much where I started. I mean, one of the first things I did as a teenager, that I never told anybody about. My mom was real proud of it. People kept walking across our grass, and my mom was like real proud of her yard. She worked very hard on it. So I wrote a letter to, I think it was our alder person. We got a fence. So it was one of the first things I did. And when I was in high school, I was among a group of young people who, we petitioned for an African American history class in our school where there had never been one, and we got it. So there is no question that young people, move the world. So just get involved where you are, or join us here. You can do both. Join us here with Young Eco-Socialists as well.
Well, I would add that don't let old folks marginalize you. I remember when I was young, and I'd be in meetings and I'd say something, and people would then keep talking, and then somebody would say what I said, like I hadn't said it, and then people paid attention. And, you got to search yourself. Back in the 60s, we had a phrase that originally was put out as a joke by Jack Weinberg, who was a leader of the free speech movement. Don't trust anybody over 30. And a lot of people took it seriously and literally. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but, the attitude was right, because that was, civil rights in the anti-Vietnam War movement. And the older folks were like saying, lower your expectations, compromise. And like I said earlier, once you start compromising, you never stop. So stick to your principles. And I would say you got to be part of an organization. You can't just do it on TikTok or Facebook or online with a virtual community. You should have people in your physical community, whether it's a school, a workplace, or your neighborhood, that you're involved in politically. And I would say that has to be the party. The party is where we bring together the different issues, find a common platform, and bring diverse people together around that. And if you're young, that might be the Young Eco-Socialists, the youth group of the Green Party. But, and also the movements that Angela mentioned, like Black Lives Matter or a climate justice group, Sunrise Movement, whatever it is. Be involved in those movements, but be involved in an organization, not just as an individual. I would also suggest study the history of social movements and social change, and the different kind of societies, their power structures. You got to put your activity in historical perspective, because we can be very energetic, militant, make demands, and we don't get them right away. But you study history, you understand that things happen and you feel like you're going nowhere, and suddenly you break through. And there's a quote attributed to Gandhi that I like is, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so, understand that this is not something you do for one election. It's something you do for your life, and make it part of your life. And that's my best advice.
I think that's like massive. And I think that just looking in my own life, that's absolutely true. I mean, I started recognizing myself as an activist in a very marginal way as a teenager, and I'm 46 years old. And, this is something that, you're always going to stand up. It's just, it's part of who you are. So yeah, that's an excellent point, Howie.
Damari Sanchez Contreras, what are some of your policies that are unique, unlike the other parties?
Where you want to start?
Yeah. But, I would just say in this election, we were for a Green New Deal. Trump and Biden were not. We were for Medicare for all. Trump and Biden were not. We were for ending the endless wars. Biden is not. Trump said he was, but he is not. If you look at what he did, not what he said. Legal marijuana, tuition-free public college. I mean, like Angela said, where do you want to start? We have a progressive eco-socialist program, and the Democrats and Republicans, one conservative writer once called the Democrats the world's second most enthusiastic capitalist party, of course, after the Republicans. And that's how the Democrats are going to rule, jointly with the Republicans at the national level. So it goes right down to the basic perspective of, we need system change, not just a reform here and there. And I think the other thing, you asked about policies. I was going to say, I'll just add it, is that we are trying to represent, working and middle class people, ordinary people, not the corporate special interests. We don't take money from them. The two major parties do, and they're indentured to that money in those special interests. So I think that's another fundamental difference between us and the Democrats and Republicans.
Somebody is saying in the chat, Sora Serene is saying, I don't understand why everyone is against eco-socialism. It doesn't make any sense to me either. I mean, for me, eco-socialism just makes sense. I mean, you want what is good for this planet because it is our shared home. And also people and resources and human and non-human life are not here to be exploited. We're not commodities. But you'd be surprised how many people don't think that way.
But we know what the people that attack eco-socialism say. Ecology, or the environment, is said to be in conflict with jobs, which has been the corporate line. I mean, I've been fighting this since the 70s in the anti-nuclear movement, and it's not true. We'll create more jobs by going to clean energy than we will by staying with fossil fuels and nuclear fuels. And then the other thing is socialism has been misrepresented by the capitalist interests as authoritarian, undemocratic, when actually it's an expansion of democracy into the economy. And by having a more equitable distribution of income and wealth, then you don't have a plutocracy, a rich class that then can control politics with their money. So it's actually, to have real political democracy, you need the economic democracy of socialism. And that's going to take a while to, educate people about that. I think the good thing now is in the last 5 years or so, socialism is no longer a conversation stopper for a lot of people. It's a conversation starter. People want to know more about it, and a lot more people are beginning to understand what it really is. Moon X Star, what made you different from Biden and Trump with COVID-19? You want to start on that one, Angela?
Yeah, let me call Dita real quick. She does not need to wander freely. She does things. One of the things that differed us from the biggest thing that separated us from Biden and Trump when it came to COVID is the fact that we recognize that there's no medical infrastructure in this country that is prepared to handle something like COVID-19. When you talk about Medicare for all as a community controlled national health service, that's ours. The Democrats batted the name of Medicare for all around and things like that. But the full strength Medicare for all, that came from us. And that would have been the first thing that we would have been working to implement, so that you have people being able to get the care that they needed. Also, one of the things we would have done immediately so that people were able to shelter in place is make sure that people were financially supported. So, everyone would receive $2,000 a month for every adult, $500 a month for every child for the duration of the pandemic. And that way we weren't forcing people out into, which is what we saw. Myself being an essential worker, I know exactly, how that goes. I've worked the whole time that this pandemic has been happening. People needed to be able to stay at home and still meet whatever financial obligations that they had. So we would have made sure that people had, financial support coming from the government so that they could do that. And also making sure that landlords and small businesses that employ people receive money so that they could stay afloat without having to lean on their tenants and without having to, as we've seen, in so many cities across the country, losing small businesses because they can't, they couldn't keep their employees and things like that. I mean, it was a snowball. And so we would have implemented policies that kept people going while allowing them to shelter in place. And we would have instituted a nationwide test, trace, and isolate program, to monitor the spread of infection and give, people who are infected the best care that they could possibly get. And I mean, there's more. And you look like you want to comment on it, Howie. And since you wrote it, you probably should comment on it.
Well, test, trace, and isolate is how we stem community spread, which is running wilder now than it has during the whole pandemic. I mean, this thing has got much worse, and it looks to get worse in the next few weeks. And that's how you reopen the economy. And now the economy is reopened without the safety precautions from, good public guidelines for how businesses should reopen if they do, to OSHA standards. OSHA should have special COVID regulations that businesses are required to meet. There's no movement there. And I haven't heard anything from the Biden team on that. In fact, on test, trace, and isolate, I haven't heard them put that together in a sentence. They say we need increased testing. I'm thinking of the last debate. And then later on in the debate, Biden says we need tracing. He never talked about isolating those exposed and infected so they don't spread it. I don't think he's put that together. Now, hopefully the public health officials, experts he's pulling together will tell him what to do, because he never seemed to have figured it out. And then we got a COVID relief package coming where looks like McConnell's going to be able to, the Republicans are going to revert to being fiscal hawks. They're going to say, we don't have money, the cupboard is bare. And I'm afraid the Democrats are going to agree with them, which is nonsense. Federal government can create the money through the Federal Reserve and spend it into the economy through the federal budget. Instead, they're going to be tight. So I expect crumbs for working people and corporate welfare for the special interests, on the theory that it's going to trickle down to us, because with more money, they'll supposedly invest in great jobs. They're going to buy financial assets with extra money, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, and that'll just rearrange the productive assets that we have and further concentrate ownership of them. And so you can expect a stagnant recovery. That's where the Green New Deal comes in. That's where the federal government, instead of this trickle-down economics, it doesn't trickle down to us. The government directly employs people and directly produces what we need, whether we're talking about healthcare or clean energy or new manufacturing systems that don't release carbon. And the only way we're going to get that done in the time scale we need is public enterprise and planning. And that's where we get back to eco-socialism. And of course, you know, what Angela said first is so obvious. We need a public health care system, Medicare for all. And Biden's answer to Bernie Sanders on that in their last debate was, it's irrelevant to COVID. I mean, Donald Trump was ignorant, but Joe Biden ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer either.
I think that's kind. Andrew Gaffney, what is your perspective on unions? I work for one in New York City and follow all the EPA regulations, but I find the other parties just pander to us and give us no results. You answered it. Howie and I did a live stream on Labor Day, as a matter of fact, with Howie, you know, being a retired Teamster. And I was the legislative director for the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 998. Hey, y'all. For a couple of years. So you're talking to two union people. And, you know, we believe that unions are extremely important. They're as important now as they ever were for being a voice for workers. And there's a lot of ways that labor needs to reinvent itself and reinvent itself by going back to its roots, you know, which are explicitly socialist, you know, organizing all workers, not leaving people out because of their gender or their race, not making deals with the boss, not trying to collude with management, you know, being explicit about standing up for the workers and not being afraid to be radical, as Howie, you know, says all the time too. And I think one of the strengths of the Fight for 15 movement, one of those things is just making sure that, you know, it's demand of big labor to involve all workers. You know, one of the I think one of the biggest things that labor messed up with was being a gatekeeper against, you know, people in certain jobs. You know, if you know, this idea of this hierarchy of workers, all work has dignity, as you know, as the quote goes. And so I think one of the biggest things that labor has to do if it wants to be relevant again, because it isn't, like I said, as necessary now as it ever has been, that labor is going to have to go back and organize and be a home for all workers and make sure that all workers, no matter what you do, are receiving, you know, the option to be in a union and to have union, what am I trying to say? Union protections. It's been a long day. And Howie, what else did you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, the person who asked the question is right. You know, the parties, it's really the Democratic Party, because that's where labor gives all its money. And the Democratic Party says thank you and then takes us for granted. We are now in the third Democratic administration that has promised to pass legislation that will allow card check recognition of collective bargaining units. In other words, instead of having an election after you collect signatures that people want a union, once you got the signatures of the majority of people in the unit that wants to bargain, you got a union and you can bargain. And Obama promised that twice and abandoned it twice. The Democratic platform has it in this time. That's one of their promises. We can try to hold them accountable to. We'll see, but I'm not optimistic on that. I think we have to understand that the officers of most of our unions are on the defensive. The number of private sector workers who are now in a union is below 6%. It's less than it was in the 1920s. I mean, the labor movement has, really taken it on the chin. It's got no backing from either party. I mean, the Republicans attack it. The Democrats give it lip service, but don't support it. And then some people say, well, we can't have a party until the unions break with the Democrats. And I think what we are going to see is that the unions won't break with the Democrats till we build a stronger party on the left. That then they'll want to get on the bandwagon. So I don't think we can wait for the unions. We got to build that party. And then when they see that, we're competitive, a lot of them are going to come with us. But we should still raise the question of independent politics within our unions, our labor councils. I mean, even the AFL-CIO passed a resolution a few years ago saying we're going to look at independent candidates. They don't do it, but they had to pass the resolution because that's what, organized workers, rank and file, really wants. So the other thing I'll say is, as Greens, as socialists in our party, we should, not be put off by union leaders that, want to hobnob with the Democratic leaders. Go to the rank and file. It's one person, one vote. And if you can't get the union leaders to get their union behind us, we can still get rank and file workers with us. El Jesus. How would you help undocumented immigrants and deal with immigration as presidents? So I guess we're both going to be presidents, Angela. You want to start with that question?
Well, one of the things we believe in is open borders and making sure that people are able to travel freely. And, if you're not wanted by the law on either side of the border, they check your passport, come on through, do what you do. We want the end of ICE and also the end of Border Patrol, which have been shown to be racist, among other things. And we want the immediate closure of the camps that, undocumented immigrants are being held in around this country, which I and Howie both feel to call it a national disgrace is an understatement. And we want family reunification and how do you put it, Howie, when you say it? Like an accelerated path to citizenship? Is that what it is?
Yeah, and to asylum and immigration applications so that people aren't waiting very long. And I would add, we would give documents to everybody so they can be here legally while they go through the process before we get to open borders and be provided with services. So these people have been detained and separated from their families can get housing, employment, education, what they need, healthcare for sure. The COVID is spreading through these camps. And we have people on the Mexican side that have a right to come here and ask for immigration or asylum and are being kept on the other side. They should be let in forthwith. And then, they go through the process. So, but I think the most important thing is give documents to everybody who's already here so they can go around legally and not be afraid of getting caught by La Migra, as we used to call it back in the day, and, can, try to settle in and, get their formal residence or asylum, and then if they want, a path to citizenship.
And I want to jump in super quick because I think this is a really important question. And she, this is a member of the family. Hey Mel. Ms. Mighty Mel is asking, how can we ensure the anger of the working class can find an outlet through left-wing socialism rather than right-wing nationalism now that a fully corporatist president and Congress have been elected? And I think that's been one of the biggest questions that we've had, looming over us, is like, because there is such a hole where the left should be in this country, that we do not have a unified left. How do we make sure that, people are directed away from fascism and, towards a socialism that is constructive and helpful for the planet? So I'm glad you asked that question. And I think it's just making sure that we are doing the education. And a lot of y'all in the comments have said that, like, we need to make sure people don't understand socialism in this country, because the way that it has, been traditionally taught is propaganda. That anything outside of good old American capitalism is a bad thing. And so I think it's something that, as part of unifying the left, we have got to do popular and political education, and get people to understand the history of the left in this country, that we have a very long history. What we're doing did not start in a vacuum. And, we're links in a very long chain. And, I think that's where we start with that, and how we're like making sure that people are not moving towards fascism, that they have an outlet within socialism. How do we make that happen?
Yeah, I think that's a crucial question. I mean, Trump got more votes this time than last time. He got more votes among every social group you can think of. Actually, white men is the only one he lost votes with, but not by much. He got more black votes, black women, black men, more Latinos, more middle class, white women he won. So question you have to ask is why? And the exit polls show that people whose top issue was the economy were more likely to vote for Trump. People whose top issue was COVID were more likely to vote for Biden. The Democrats didn't have an economic message. Biden was just not Trump, nothing more. He had a slogan, Build Back Better, but, Trump is running around, he's lying, but like in Ohio, which he won, he said he brought a manufacturing miracle. I did a news conference at the State House there pointing out, some miracle. He lost 44,000 manufacturing jobs since COVID broke out. And it devastated businesses because he blew the response to COVID. But Massachusetts was losing manufacturing jobs before that. But he goes around and says, I'm bringing a manufacturing miracle. And the Democrats don't have a counter message. They're not Trump. Trump is a, mean guy. He scapegoats people. He's a racist. Yeah, that's true. But so a lot of the Trump voters are people that have been abandoned, and they feel the Democratic Party abandoned them, particularly on economic issues. Social issues play a role. That's true. So that's where that right-wing nationalism is. And so what the Trump side is offering is a strong man, that Trump tries to project that. Scapegoats, it's Mexicans taking your jobs to Mexico, not the corporations that move the jobs there. But, people just hear the slogans, and there's not a counter message to them. And then they got all these conspiracy fantasies. The vote was stolen, QAnon, all the Democrats are child eating, what do they call them? Sexual pedophiles. I mean, when you don't have a counter narrative, people turn to this stuff. Now that's where we need to step up. We need to be organized in communities and talking to folks. And, we often talk about we want to reach the working class, people of color and youth that are voting in low numbers. We got to be talking to middle class and working class Trump people who are looking for answers because they've been devastated by factory closings. They've been hit harder by COVID than other places. And who's talking to them? It's only the right. And the left, has a message for them. We got an economic program. And the thing we got to show, and I think this is the most important thing, is people, when they're just, lining up behind somebody like Trump, and otherwise, the message to them from the establishment, the media is, it's your own damn fault, you're in trouble. And Trump gives them a scapegoat. It's immigrants, Muslims, minorities. But what we got to show is that collective action gets the goods. We need to organize locally, and it doesn't have to be a big win. But if these folks see that we care about them and we can win something, I think that's the counter narrative to the Republicans who are mobilizing these people around, the fascist strongman, scapegoats, and that's classic fascism, and the irrationalism of these conspiracy theories. And I hope that's not 5-0 outside my window. Can you see the flashing on me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's a tow truck, thank God. But anyway, this is a big challenge because if we don't answer the call, because the Democrats are not, you're going to have a, fiscal austerity with Biden running everything past McConnell. We need to provide real answers. And somebody's knocking on my window, so I'll be right back.
Yeah, just making sure that people are that the left is in a position to push back with our own narrative against whatever, is going on. And also protecting our people. This goes back to what we've been saying about popular education, about, political education, and also mutual aid efforts, things that are actually, things we're doing to help people's immediate material conditions improve, to make sure that that folks are that they're okay and that we're showing up for each other. So I think there's a lot of things that we're going to have to do, and a lot of this is already being done. I'm thinking of, my hometown, which I'm reluctant to say because I'm really mad at them right now, but I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and just thinking of all the things that we were involved in organizing up there and making sure that people were, being fed, and making sure that, people were receiving things that they needed that helped them immediately, and also doing skill shares and things like that. So I'm, very, very present ways of being with our communities. People who are not necessarily, leftists see that, and they see us being the ones that are helping. They'll stand with us. I'm tossing that one to you, Mr. President.
All right, Cindy A. Matthews. How can the Green Party, excuse me, help bring about the restitution of land to indigenous tribes that was stolen from them? Honor indigenous treaty rights. I mean, that's something this country has violated. Those treaties are equivalent to the Constitution, under the Constitution. And, just for everybody ought to realize that we can't enforce treaty rights. We can't enforce constitutional rights that all of us are entitled to. So that's where we got to start, because land has been stolen that is Indian land under the treaties, and there are services that the treaties say the federal government is supposed to provide, and it has not provided adequately. So I think that's the place to start. Now, in some cases, the courts have ruled that indigenous nations came forward with claims too late. Like right here in Syracuse, next door to us, adjacent, is the Onondaga Nation. And they went to court, and the court said, you're too late. And there's good reason why they came when they came. I won't go into all the details, but we need federal legislation that says, no, it's not too late. The treaty is a treaty. And you just don't say, oh, it's been too long, we're not going to enforce it. So, but that requires legislation to overrule the courts. So those are the two things I would say. You know, honor the treaty rights and then get legislation so all the treaties can be honored. Roberto Laredo. What should youth voters and those who are not old enough to vote yet do to help the Green Party grow, especially in the next 4 years? Yeah, that's a question we've been getting from a lot of young people. And they keep saying, keep running so we can vote for you when we get old enough. And I feel you. I couldn't vote till I was 21 because we didn't have that amendment yet that brought it down to 18. In Brazil, you can vote when you're 16. So maybe that's one thing we need to work on. But I would say, in addition to what I said earlier, or repeat what I said earlier, get involved in an organization, the Young Eco-Socialists. I'm not sure what age they accept. I think at age 14, you can become a member. That's the Green Party's Youth Caucus. And that'll hook you into the organization. And a lot of their work is educational, but also activism. And probably that's a good place to start. And it's on the screen there. All right, took it down as soon as I said that. There it is. yesgp.org.
Hey, Claire. Claire Soraya is asking, how would you make fair trade agreements in the U.S.?
Well, transparency to begin with. These trade agreements tend to be negotiated in secret, and then it leaks out, and we find out all these terrible things in these proposed trade agreements. And they should be fair because labor and the public is engaged in the process, including disputes of violation of trade agreements. Right now, most of them have secretive trade tribunals that only states and corporations have access to. And even the transcripts of testimony and the rationale for decisions are not public in some cases. So we just get the decision. And what they do in those tribunals is knock down environmental and labor regulations inside countries. They call them non-tariff trade barriers. And that can't happen. We can't get into trade agreements that prevent us from regulating our own communities. So those are some of the things we need to do. And I think all these trade agreements need to be renegotiated because they're designed to be managed by corporate interests. And the workers have been basically screwed. The trade agreement should be designed to bring workers up and environmental standards up on both sides of borders. Not, as Trump was trying to do, get advantage over a country. And, then he went with, tariffs and trade wars. That's not an answer either. Because, the working class is international. And if we allow the borders to divide us, the corporations are global and they win.
Trayton Bostic. I'm forgetting who read the last one, how I don't mean be jumping in front of you. Do you guys support or organize for ranked choice voting? Yes. What voting system would you like to see? I think we've been like one of the loudest voices for ranked choice voting and also proportional representation where it's appropriate. I think of the three major parties, basically of any party that I've heard lately, we're the only ones really talking about pushing ranked choice voting. You hear anybody else talking about it, Howie?
Not among the parties. Libertarians don't really lead with it. They certainly haven't been involved in the campaigns like we have. We have 23 cities and counties now with ranked choice voting. We got it in the state of Maine. We lost it in referendums in Massachusetts and Alaska this time. But I don't think that should stop us. I think that's an issue that we can push at the local level, and that builds support so we can get it at the state level and in the federal level. And, when Angela and I put out our election night statement, We said we're going to keep fighting for a Green New Deal, an economic bill of rights, a new foreign and military policy, but also a democracy agenda. And I think the thing the Greens need to lead on is, at the federal level, replace the Electoral College, abolish it, and replace it with a national popular vote using ranked choice voting for president. And then in Congress, there's a bill called the Fair Representation Act. And it calls for using ranked choice voting for multi-member districts where possible. So Vermont has one representative, and so does Wyoming. So it would just be a ranked choice voting for that single seat. But in a state like New York with 29 representatives in the House, we could have 3 districts of 9 or 10 each. So the winning threshold would be about 10%. And you can use ranked choice voting. In that instance, it's often called the single transferable vote. And you'll get proportional representation in legislative bodies. And that's really the game changer. Once we get that, there are going to be Greens on every legislative body in the country. And once we're part of the debate, that's half the battle, because we're going to win those debates and, bring people around to our point of view. So I think that's a key issue, and one that we can, without running candidates, in a lot of places do by initiative referenda and or lobbying city councils, county boards, and trying to get that instituted. I think that's a huge issue going forward, particularly because we got to deal with the spoiler question all the time. This is the answer. I'm sick and tired of these damn Democrats saying we're spoiling elections when they've been spoiling the election. We've been giving them the solution in presidential elections. Abolish the Electoral College and go to a national popular vote using ranked choice voting. We've been giving them that since 2000, where we didn't actually spoil it. It was black voter suppression and the Electoral College that has put these Republican losers like Trump in office. And the Democrats don't seem smart enough to go after the real solution. They think they get rid of us. Well, we're not going anywhere, for number one. And number two, we weren't the cause. We didn't do the Electoral College. We haven't been suppressing the black vote. That was the Republicans. So, fight the Republicans, not us.
They don't do that. They demonize us. They bully us. They push us off of ballots. I've said this. The only time that the Democrats have ever shown any courage is when it comes to third parties, particularly with us. When it comes to actually standing up to the Republicans and fighting them on things that really need to be fought on, they capitulate every time. And I'm happy to have that talk with them.
Tony Jackson says, what would you do to make better relationships with other countries?
Diplomacy. Stop making war on them. Remove our military personnel and all of our toys from their countries. Stop taking their natural resources. Stop abusing their land. There's a whole lot of things that we could do to foster better relationships with other countries. And we are and I can say this with certainty, we're the only party that has actually put out peace policies. We are the only ones that are talking about reducing the size of our military, which has an enormous carbon footprint, as well as, this policy of aggression and domination that we have in moving around the world. We need to not do that. And we're the only party that is talking about, moving in a diplomatic way, reducing our part in the nuclear arms race, not going into other countries and taking their natural resources, bringing our personnel home and reinvesting both those human resources and financial resources in the infrastructure rebuilding of this country. There's a whole lot of, things that we can do to improve relations with other countries. And I've seen it in the chat, asking us where we stand with the developments in Bolivia and in Chile. When we we saw the election results. I know we had been watching what was going on, watching the election in Bolivia. I felt like I won the Super Bowl and I wasn't even involved. That was like a massive, massive win. And so, the things that are happening in both Bolivia and in Chile, those things are encouraging. And we want, respect, to be respectful of other nations and their right to have diplomatic, Lord Jesus, it's been a long day, democratic elections without the interference of the United States. So, and Howie, your
Well, I
thoughts?
would say, this is where we need system change. Countries' foreign and military policy comes out of their domestic politics, their domestic power structure. And we have a global military empire, an imperialist policy, because the people in power in this country, the big capitalists, want their global corporations that are based here to have access to cheap labor, resources, and geopolitical positioning of our military. Over 800 foreign military bases. That's why we're involved in all these wars. That's why instead of respecting, the decision of the people, like in Honduras or Bolivia or Venezuela, we want to change regimes and do. And so that means, the economic democracy of socialism and the greater equality, political and economic, means we don't have an interest in fighting people around the world. That's not about ordinary people in this country and our peace and security. That's about the security of the profits of these global corporations and banks that are based in the US. And they're competing with other capitalist countries. And sometimes in alliance, sometimes fighting. And so I'm just saying, you want to end US imperialism, you got to end US capitalism and get to an economic democracy, socialism. Muhammad Akbar, how can we get involved in supporting and building the Green Party USA? Well, you can go to the Green Party US website, which is gp.org, and find they have ways to connect with local or actually state parties. And our campaign wants to really help build. I have to say the Green Party nationally doesn't have much of a structure or support network. And we're trying to do that through our campaign post-election. So I would suggest you also sign up with us, fill out the volunteer form, and we'll find out what state you're in. And we're going through all the states to see what the situation is, evaluate what we learned during the campaign and figure out where we might could help. So those are my suggestions. And like I said before, if you don't hear back from us, be the squeaky wheel. We're not as well organized. We're not as well funded as we should be. But we want to get there, and so make sure we do.
And that, I think, that will be the question that wraps us. I just got a notice that'll wrap us up tonight. And yes, people, we are going to look into making a TikTok account. That's all I see over here. I'm going to have to go on TikTok and figure out how this thing works then. Cause yeah, I'm old. So
I think we actually have one, but you and I didn't put it up. I know we were talking about doing it, but there's only so much you can do. There was a lot of tasks to do during the campaign. So last thoughts, Angela?
I don't want to look like one of them old people that's trying too hard. So that's part of the reason I haven't tried with TikTok. Cause old people try to look relevant to young people. You just look stupid. I'm not trying to do that. So, but yeah, I'm appreciating just all of these new young folks. A lot of folks from overseas joined us tonight. Thank y'all for the encouragement. I think the biggest thing to come out of this, I know there's a lot, like we said, there's a lot of feelings around the way this election is shaping up. We just want people to know that we're here. We're not going anywhere. The things that we campaigned on, we're still going to be fighting for. And we're happy to have you with us in this fight. So, like we say I say every week, I want y'all to make sure that you are taking care of yourselves. There's still a pandemic happening. There's a lot of stress. For y'all who are asking, we do this every Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel, 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right here. There will be no working with Biden. Sorry, we're not them people. So that's all I got, Mr. President.
Well, if Biden wanted to work with us, maybe we could talk. But that's not happening. I mean, their stance toward us was to eliminate us, knock us off ballots. So that's where that's at. I think I'll just conclude for those that didn't hear me at the beginning briefly with what I said then. I don't think people should be discouraged. This election was a referendum on Trump. We're kind of beside the point, given that so much of the center and the left just wanted Trump out of there, and Biden they saw as their tool. In contrast to 2016, we did better. That was an open seat, and both Clinton and Trump were very unpopular candidates. So that larger dynamic kind of explains where we ended up. But meanwhile, at the local level, we ran over 200 campaigns. Over 10 of them won, some of them pretty significant. And I think that points to where we got to go in the next period. Got to go back to our communities, strengthen our locals, start electing more and more people to local office. And that's the foundation for state legislatures and Congress. And when we get a caucus in the House and we run a ticket for president, they won't be able to ignore us. The other thing is, the issues we are running on, according to public opinion polls, are what the people want. They want a Green New Deal. They want Medicare for all. They want an end to these endless wars. And they want the federal government not going off to war, but taking care and protecting the people and the planet. That's what we stood for, and Trump and Biden were opposed. So we're actually the most popular party in the country if people had a chance to hear us, and we didn't have this winner-take-all electoral system where people are afraid of, quote-unquote, spoiling their election and wasting their vote. Although we'd argue it's a waste to vote for what you don't want. So we expect the Biden administration, they're going to run everything by McConnell in the Senate, try to build bipartisan consensus, which means progressives are going to be disappointed. And I think it's going to come pretty quick once we see who the cabinet is, and then we start getting some of the policies. We get a weak COVID relief package. So our time is coming. Get ready. And we'll see you next Tuesday.